Well, good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to today's lunchtime webinar. We're today talking about the anatomy of a workplace mediation. I'm Dr. Mike Talbot. I'm the CEO and founder of UK Mediation and EU Mediation. For those who don't know me, I have a background in psychotherapy. So our webinar today and every webinar has this flavour of talking about the psychology of conflict, about how we get into conflict, why it's so difficult, what we can do to get ourselves out of conflict, and especially what we can do by using an impartial third party who we'll call the mediator to help us resolve conflict and move on from one of these most difficult aspects of working relationships is when we fall out with other people, get into wrangles with other people, have clashes with colleagues at work. So that's what today is all about. So quickly move on because there's quite a bit to talk about. And just before I do, a big welcome to everybody who's joining us today from the UK and from around the world. I see from around 6 or 7 different countries represented today. You're all very welcome to join us. And as we go today, if you would like to comment or ask a question, please use the chat box that's open in the app. Make any comments, ask a question. I've got my colleague watching the chat box so we can make sure we catch any comments or questions. If you prefer to wait till afterwards, you're very welcome to email us, and there'll be details about that and about our social at the end as well. So good to have some interaction with you. If you would like to chip in, be very pleased to hear from you. So what are we going to do today? Okay, overview of today's webinar. We're going to talk about workplace mediation in action. So I've got a lot of video clips to show you today just to illustrate what we're talking about. Quite often mediation's easy to talk about, not quite so easy to do. And a good way to represent what actually happens is to see a dramatised workplace conflict and then how we address it with the various stages of the mediation model. So there are 6 or 7 stages. We'll look at all of those one by one, and again a few video clips along the way to illustrate what we're talking about with regards to the anatomy of the workplace mediation process and how we apply it, what we're going to do with these skills, how it would enmesh with perhaps what else is going on in the workplace. And particularly I want to start just with a comment about the manager's input and when you decide to use mediation. So we'll do that bit as well, and a bit of time at the end for Q&A as well. But like I say, if you want to question or comment as we go along, please feel free to chip in. So quite a lot to say in these 45 minutes or so. Let's get straight on with it. Workplace mediation, dramatised example, including 2 characters called Sally and Heather. So Sally and Heather work together in a supplies company. We're going to see what goes wrong with these two. We'll just watch it and then I'll talk about it afterwards. So let's meet Sally and Heather.
Sally and Heather work together in the accounts department of Connors Plumbing Supplies. Heather has been in her role for some years, while Sally has only recently joined the department following a reshuffle. There is some bad feeling from Heather over Sally's appointment, with Heather claiming that Sally only got the job because of her friendship with James, the departmental manager. Sally and James had worked together over a number of years before the current reshuffle. Sally claims in return that Heather over-scrutinises her work and her timekeeping and is cold and unfriendly with her. The two have quite different approaches to work, and this has begun to cause some tension. James has no issue with the two of them getting the job done, but has needed to speak to them separately about the importance of getting on together. They continue to rub each other up the wrong way, and there is often an atmosphere in the office. It is Tuesday morning, a few days before the deadline for an important report to be completed. Sally is on the phone to her friend.
Hi Liz, yeah, it's nice to talk to you. Yeah, I was just ringing to find out what time we're going to meet for the theatre on Tuesday. Yeah. We go for about 1:30. Perfect. Yeah, it'd be fantastic to see you then. Oh, actually, do you want to go for a coffee first? That would be great.
Oh, for God's sake, it's not like it's even dinner time or anything.
Yeah, 1:30, Liz. Yeah, that should be absolutely fine. Okay. All right. Bye. What are you doing at the weekend?
Nothing special.
Oh, we're going out with Phil. It's his birthday. Do you know Phil from sales?
Yeah.
It's his 50th. Would you like to come along?
No, it's all right. It's not really my kind of thing.
Oh, this is 50. You should really enjoy yourself. Come on, you have fantastic time if you come.
Look, I said no, I don't want to go. We've got this important report to get finished. Perhaps we should be getting on with that instead of organising our social life.
Well, oh, has she had a second baby yet? Oh, that's lovely. She had a little boy. What's she called him? Oh, that's really nice. Hold on a minute.
Sorry to interrupt. How's your part of the report going?
Yeah, getting it done.
Do you think you'll have it done by tonight? Only I've got mine finished and I need to work yours into it.
By tomorrow. Yes, hi Ruth. Sorry for the interruption.
Sorry, Sally, I've not finished.
Sorry Ruth, I'll have to ring you back.
You've been on the phone for nearly 20 minutes. You could be doing your report then.
I'm
Before
on the
that, you
phone
had a break.
to Ruth from Albright's.
Well, it doesn't sound like it. You was on for at least 20 minutes and before that having a break.
Is that right? That's the crux of it, isn't it? You are constantly monitoring when I go for my break. You think you're in charge, well you're not. You're always evaluating what I'm doing and timing when I have my breaks. I've had enough of it.
No, I don't. You're just being bloody childish now. For God's sake, can you just get your part of the work done? I've had enough of this. You're an absolute nightmare. I'm going to have to speak to James.
Heather goes to see James to complain about what she sees as Sally's lack of commitment to the job, distracting behaviour and disregard for important deadlines. James spends some time with Heather and then asks to speak to Sally, who tells James that she is upset about aspects of Heather's manner towards her. Later that morning, James gets them together for a joint conversation, partly about the day's events, but also about the more long-standing conflict between the two of them. James has previously spoken to the two of them about their working relationship and feels that he has done all he can. He proposes that they try mediation to build a better understanding of each other. An external mediator is brought in. He starts by seeing the two colleagues separately with the intention of getting them together later on.
So there we have it. There's the drama between Sally and Heather. A big bit of context there just to set up the whole thing so we can see really what's going on between these two individuals and we can make some sense of why it's come to mediation and also have a think about initially what the manager does and why it gets referred on. So let's think about the relationship with these two first of all. So there's been a restructure, as is quite common within organisations, and people end up working with others than they're used to working with. Sometimes there's promotions or movements sideways, but in this case there's a perception of unfair treatment, how the person got the job, and a suggestion that there was some, some nepotism involved in getting the job. A clash of styles. Clearly the Heather character likes to work more intensely, more quietly, get on with the job. For Sally, she's got a customer-facing role. She enjoys making the connections with customers, building the sort of friendships with the people that they have to deal with. Whereas for Heather, it seems she's more like a head-down, headphones-on person, concentrate in a quiet working environment and just get on with the job. So this has clearly led to a breakdown in communication between the two, and as we can see in the very shouty sort of fallout there in the kitchen, they've got to the point where they're not able to talk in a very constructive, very adult to adult way, and it's become a lot of finger pointing and quite a lot of raised voices. So there we have the sort of the setup for the conflict, if you like. Then clearly there'll be some input locally. So the manager would want to make sort of some assessment of what's going on and try and decide what to do with the breakdown in the relationship between these two characters. So from manager's point of view, well, the job is actually getting done. So the manager might consider that there's no particular capability issues here at this point. They are actually producing what they're supposed to be producing, doing the job they're getting paid for, and the manager has spoken to them both, taken them aside, had a private word, said, you know, what's going on. And as we would strongly recommend is only use mediators if you need to. If you can have local managers, team leaders, other people within a more local environment of the workplace, of the working environment of these two characters, try and facilitate a conversation between the two. So We are often trying to do ourselves out of business by saying you don't need mediators. Just get people skilled in how to facilitate conversations, perhaps using some mediation skills or some skills in understanding about how better to address conflict at an informal level, and try and do that first. Quite a lot of situations would get nipped in the bud. Manager's tried it here, didn't work. He's decided that what we need is this extra layer of independence or impartiality. So we need to have a mediation. Now, there might be a mediator within the organisation, might be a mediator who's external to the organisation, but in this case, in this example, they're going to bring in a mediator. So we're talking about bringing in an external mediator. And now I can illustrate the 7-stage mediation model. So from the point of referral, which is the local manager probably making a referral to the external mediator, brief information about what's going on with the two characters. We don't need chapter and verse. To the point where the mediator then gets involved and we begin the 7-stage model. So what we would do is to set it up with the first contact that the mediator would have with either of the parties. Somebody's got to go first. So we're going to call them party 1 and party 2, just a jargon that we use. And there would be a private meeting with the party 1. So this is the job of the mediator now, is to allow some offloading, to explain what mediation's all about, to find out what the person's interests are. And those of you who trained with us know exactly what we mean by positions and interests, but trying to deduce what are the drivers here, what are the unmet needs of the two parties. So within our sort of model, we're looking at sort of a psychological angle on this. So there's some need in terms of being allowed to do my job to the best of my ability, having some overlap of social and professional, having some contact throughout the day with another party, being able to get on at a sort of a chatty level with people. Whatever those interests are, we want to deduce those and try and just hold those in mind for the first party as we go through the staged process. And the only other thing we would need to get with the party 1 in this initial meeting is their agreement to take it forwards this way. So mediation is built on 3 building blocks. So the anatomy of the workplace mediation, it has to be an impartial practitioner. The process needs to be confidential, and you'll see some discussion about confidentiality in the next clip. And then it has to be voluntary, so they have to want to take part. Okay, so confidential, impartial and voluntary, and we'll see those things mentioned in the party 1 meeting with Heather. Somebody has to go first, doesn't matter who goes first. In this case, it's Heather. So let's see what happens in her party 1 meeting. Thanks for coming down. My name's Mike. I'm the mediator. I get asked to be involved to help out with people's working relationships. So we've got this bit of time. Just with you on your own first, and then with a view to coming back this afternoon for a conversation with your colleague. Okay. Have you been told much about mediation?
Not a lot. I mean, when James, our manager, mentioned, I had a quick look on the internet, you know, as you do. So I know it's there to try and help people sort the problems out, but obviously how it works, I don't really know much.
Okay, great. Well, initially we have this bit of private time, and it's your chance to tell me about things from your point of view. And I encourage people to speak openly and honestly, and there's a few sort of rules or boundaries about that which I can tell you about now.
Okay.
So the first thing is this is private, and unless I have any concerns about anybody coming to any harm, we keep it within the room. So what gets said here stays here.
Yeah, okay, so that means that nothing goes back to Sally or my manager or anything like that. That's good. So
I won't be feeding anything back to Sally, and I won't be feeding back to the manager any detail about what gets said or done here today. The process might lead to an action plan or an agreement or a summary, and if that's the case, then I can help you and Sally to word that, to write down what you need to write down.
I'll be surprised if we get to an agreement, but...
Okay, to see, you know, to write down where you've got to. And if we do that, then you decide what the words are and you decide who gets to see it.
Okay.
Otherwise, all I feed back is a sentence saying that we have settled, we haven't settled.
Okay.
Okay. So provided, you know, the process runs okay and there's no reason for me to disclose anything, and there usually isn't, the whole thing is kept private. You might see me make a brief note. That's just for my memory. I don't retain any notes, and I'll shred those at the end of today.
Okay.
And the other thing is that I can't be called as a witness and, you know, to attest to anything that gets said today. And also, nothing that gets said today can be used in any other process. So the rules are there to help you speak openly and honestly.
Oh, that's good.
And the idea is that then we can have a thorough exchange of views this afternoon. If you're happy to attend that, and it'll be your chance to, you know, to come to some agreements about how better you can configure your...
I'm not sure whether we'll come to any agreements. You know, it's she can do no wrong in everyone's eyes, and that it's. I'm not sure what we'll get from it. I mean, is it compulsory I do the joint session?
No. You don't have to. It's completely voluntary, and you being here now is voluntary, and you coming back this afternoon is voluntary.
So if I feel it's just too much any time, or even if I did agree to coming in this afternoon, if that was too much, I can just leave at any time then?
That's correct, yeah.
Okay,
and if at any time you're uncomfortable, you know, the option is there for you to leave at any point.
Okay.
All right. The rules, as I've just said, them I have on a piece of paper, if you don't mind. I'd ask you to have a look at that just to make sure that you're happy about what I've said to you. This is the same for everybody, so I do ask that everybody signs up to this if they can. So just have a read of that for me. Thanks very much. So that's really the only formal thing I do. So I put that away, Heather, and I'll say start anywhere and tell me what goes on. So there's the first party meeting with Heather, who was arbitrarily chosen to go first. Chance for an offload, and there's quite a bit of that goes on in that first party meeting, just a chance to go, and in a very confidential space, just to tell somebody who's impartial and detached from the situation what's going on from her point of view. It's not a statement of fact, it's not evidential, it's not we don't make notes of it, it's not recorded, it's not a statement, it's just her giving her experience of the conflict. And quite clearly her experience of the conflict is going to be different from the second party's experience of the conflict, or they wouldn't be in conflict. So that's fair enough, and get her agreement to take it forward this way. And quite often we leave a bit of time for that in the stage one meeting, because there are often quite a few questions to be answered in terms of how it will be, how the confidentiality will work, what would it look like, will I be allowed to speak. Often people ask questions as well about, can I bring somebody with me, will there be notes, are you going to write it up, can I record it, da-da-da. And there are a different set of questions if we were doing it online, of course, if we were using video conferencing to do that. However, there's the first party meeting. Second party meeting, so we're going to meet with Sally now, and really just to do the same thing again. So it'll be quite a short clip, this one, treating them the same as party one. But the problem we go in second is that you do feel as if you're on the back foot. So it feels as if the first party has been in there talking about you. And quite often the second party, when they come in, they'll say, well, what's she been saying then? And they want to know what the first one's been saying, because in their mind this is an assessment, an arbitration. It's about finding out who's right or wrong. So they want to hear what the first person said so they can come back on it and refute what's been said about them. So the mediator's job is to resist that, to remain impartial, and to try and invest themselves as much in the second party's interests as they have invested themselves in the first party's interests. So it's getting that trust is trickier with the second party, and exercising your impartiality is trickier with the second party, simply because they go in second. So let's see what that looks like when the mediator meets with Sally. Tell me what happens round here with you and Heather.
Okay. Well, it sort of started when there was a reshuffle, and I was moved from marketing over into the accounts department, and the sort of role was created for me. I'd known James, worked with him for a long time.
James is the manager.
Yes, James the manager, and so he's created, created this role for me, and I'm working alongside Heather. Heather has been doing this job for 10 years, and she's been working completely on her own. And she saw that when I moved into the office, that it was just something that was going to cause her difficulty. I think she feels that I'm going to come in and take her job, and that I've only got the job by default, by nepotism. Heather's taken complete exception to that. She is happy working on her own. She's rule-driven, regimented, and she thinks that she's in charge. I don't think she believes that I can do accountancy. I think she firmly believes that I have only got the job on the back of the friendship I have with, or the knowing James from a working relationship. So she's sort of spread that around a little bit, I think. Oh, Sally's only got the job because James has given it to her or created it for her. Sorry.
It's very difficult. I found it
Sure
very
thing.
difficult.
No, it can be upsetting, these things. You know, so take your time.
Yeah.
Do have a sip. I've got tissues if you need. So that's the Party 2 meeting with Sally. So as you can see, there's a need for the mediator to offer some reassurance and to sort of ease the party into it. It's quite upsetting, especially if there's been a long lead-in when people get to the initial meetings with the mediator. There's a lot to say and there's often a lot of upset that's been bottled up to that point. So we do have to be, you know, quite gentle with people, offer a lot of support in terms of easing them into the process, and quite often offer quite a bit of encouragement for them to take part as well. And when we've seen the two parties, as we move into the stage 3, this is about getting them ready for a joint session. So this is all about preparing for a joint mediation meeting between the two. There's a few questions you might need to ask yourself about whether you bring the two people together, selecting a time and place, and actually about whether you're the right person to be doing the mediation. So I'm just going to pause that there a second and address a comment that we've had from Anastasia. Thanks very much, Anastasia, who is an in-house mediator and who talks about the possibility that managers might make the situation worse when they try and address things locally. Absolutely. So when we do some training with managers about how to facilitate a conversation between two colleagues, quite a lot of that training is don't do this and don't do this and don't do this. The instinct, and I fully understand it, is for a local manager or team leader who's trying to do the local facilitation to arbitrate, basically, to hear from one side, hear from the other, and then make a decision about what should happen. So the manager says, okay, I think what you should do is do this, do that, do the other, and he or she will tell them what the solution is. That can make things worse. The other thing that can make things worse is that the manager, inadvertently or otherwise, slips into determining who's right or wrong, and who unfortunately falls into the trap of attributing blame about who should have done this or should not have done that, and that can make things very much worse, Anastasia. So I absolutely agree. Sometimes it's better that the managers don't touch it locally if they know what they're doing and if they've been trained how to, number one, resist arbitrating, number two, resist taking sides and retain that impartiality, and number three, move away from a past focus, because instinctively a manager would, I'm generalising, but a manager might sort of want to hear about the history from this guy, hear about the history from that guy, and make some kind of an assessment by making deductions about what should have happened or shouldn't have happened. And, you know, I can understand managers doing that, but we need to train that out of them. And if they are doing those things, very much, I agree, Anastasia, they might make the situation worse. Okay, so we're getting ready. We're deciding whether we're the best person to be doing the mediation, select a good time and place, decide whether to bring them together at all. Occasionally we might shuttle between people, just have them in separate rooms and move to and fro, and that works as well. Analogy with online is about using breakout rooms. So if we're doing an online mediation, which is another story altogether, we might put the parties in separate breakout rooms. Ideally, however, we would get them in the same space, in a room to do mediation with the impartial third-party mediator for the face-to-face session. So we're going to see the face-to-face session now. You'll see an introduction and some rules get discussed just to define the boundaries. And then when they're all agreed, and we really just have two rules, which is not talking over each other, allowing one another time to speak, and the also nothing that could be perceived as name calling or personally abusive. So nothing that's personally attacking or labelling of one another. And apart from that, unless the parties want any additional rules, we just expect a normal level of decorum and polite conduct that you would expect in the workplace, really. So that's what we've got in place, what we put in place in the face-to-face session. Then we allow people some uninterrupted time to speak. After that, you'll see the mediator summarising people's views, trying to reframe from things that might be quite hostile and quite past-focused into things that open the door to a future-focused solution. So the summary that the mediator gives should be peppered with that kind of reframe, we would call it. And then at the end of this bit, you'll see them come up with a decision about what it is we need to negotiate, what's the agenda in effect. So usually 3 or 4 things that need to be discussed between the two parties. So we're going to see a very abbreviated version of that part of the joint session. In reality, it might take 45 minutes to an hour to do. We're going to see it in a very much potted version. So let's see what happens at the first part of the joint session with Sally and Heather. So to help your conversation to work, just a couple of things I would ask, and then I'm keen to let you get started. The first thing is I can only hear one person speaking at a time. So what I would ask, please, is if you try and let the other person finish before you speak. That way you can hear what one another has to say, and I can hear what you've both got to say when we don't have those interruptions. So would that be okay as a rule, Heather, for you?
It's fine with me.
And Sally, all right for you as well? Thank you for that. And the second thing is, I appreciate the emotions have been running high between you, and there might be some difficult things that have to be said. And that's fine. I would encourage you to express yourselves fully. Where I would ask you to draw the line is with anything that could be considered to be personally abusive, and certainly anything that could be considered to be name calling. So I'll ask you to agree, please, for the purpose of this session, to refrain from anything like that. Is that going to be okay with you, Sally?
It'll be all right with me.
And okay with you, Heather?
Yeah, it'll be fine with me.
Thank you very much. So those are the two rules, really. I think that's all we need. And apart from that, I think we can really, try and have a thorough conversation and discuss everything needs to be discussed. So if you're okay with that, then what I would suggest is, if I can hear from you both individually, if I could have one of you start to give you some uninterrupted time to talk about what's on your mind as you arrive this afternoon, and especially to talk about what you think needs to be discussed and what you want to get out of this, really. So if one of you would like to begin.
I would normally. Sally's the one with everything to say, but...
Pause you a second. So Sally, are you okay if Heather goes first?
Why not?
You're all right with that, yeah? Okay, so Heather, we'll hear from you first. So it's to have some uninterrupted time to talk to me about what's on your mind and especially what you'd like to get out of this. And while Heather's talking, Sally, if you could please listen to what she's got to say and try and refrain from interrupting. And when it's your turn, I'll make sure Heather does the same for you. Okay? So, Heather. So that's the rules agreed between the two of them. As you can see, a couple of rules there. Sometimes parties ask for a rule about this or that. It's rarely needed in workplace disputes. In other settings, there might be a need for rules about staying in your seat or something to do with swearing or all kind of things that people might ask for. But essentially, so long as we have in place those two rules, I think it's fair to progress, and then we'll see what comes up as we proceed. There was mention earlier on about the written confidentiality and liability form, and we saw that with Heather in the session. She had a piece of paper. On there we referenced proper conduct, so that's there. So there's the rules agreed. Time now to hear from the two parties, let them have some uninterrupted time, and the summaries, of course, from the mediator. Let's see how that looks. So, Sally, thank you very much for your patience while we heard from Heather. And like I say, I'll ask Heather to be patient when we hear from you in a second. So just before we do that, Heather, from your point of view, you want to be able to work without interruption. You want to have little disturbance. That's the way you work. There's a couple of things that need to be talked about with regard to eating at the desk.
Yeah.
With regard to how Sally structures her working day in a manner that suits your working day. You want to be able to speak to Sally, get hold of her. You want to be able to get hold of pieces of work that might be on her desk, which from, you describe as not as orderly as you would like it to be, or not as orderly as you would have your own workspace.
Yeah, definitely.
And some stuff about, how the two of you generally sort of relate in the office, how much chat there is, how much social contact there is, and how much work time there is.
Yeah, sometimes it's as though I feel as though she's doing it on purpose. Like with the eating, I said, she knows I can't stand it. Yet when she gets a pack of crisps out, she puts one in her mouth, looks over with a big smirk on her face, as though she's doing it on purpose.
So to have an understanding about how that affects you or impacts on you.
She doesn't seem to think it's a condition. She just shrugs it off.
Okay.
No, it's just not showing me any respect whatsoever.
Something else we could be talking about this afternoon, really. Okay.
I mean, I've tried. Right. I've tried. I tried to help her. She's never done accounts before. So I was trying to offer her training and things like that, but she seemed to think she knew it all, even though she'd not had training in it. I've studied
so there might
for years.
Be something there as well about, about how the two of you, sort of the level of competency that you're working at with the job, how much training you have or how much training you need and so on. All right, I'll pause you a second, Heather. Okay. There's a chance to come back to many of those things, all of those things. So, Sally, if I turn to you now, and thanks again for your patience while we heard from Heather.
Yeah.
So it's your turn to have some uninterrupted time. So tell me about things from your point of view, what's on your mind this afternoon, but especially, what you'd like to get out of it. So the next bit then, after we've heard from each of the two parties and the mediator has done the summaries in that kind of a vein, we spent a bit of time on that because I wanted you to see how we take what's quite hostile and past focused and all to do with positions about people saying what's got to happen, and the mediator tries to reframe that in his summary into something that's rather more future focused, to do with people's underlying needs and interests, and hopefully opens the door to a solution. So he's not trying to force or arbitrate a solution. But what we do need to do right now is to focus people's minds and to make an agenda which references what it is that needs to be sorted out. So we'll see this short section now as the mediator takes what we've had so far in the session and tries to turn that into an agenda. And we happen to use a flip chart in this case. You don't have to, you don't need to, but for illustration, he's doing it on a flip chart as in this clip, he makes the agenda. Few things there that you would like to discuss, few things there you'd like to discuss. Some of them are in common, some of them are individual to you. So from what I'm hearing, and correct me if I'm wrong, you know, there's a need to get a better deal about the state of the working environment. You know, you like it orderly and knowing where you can put your hand on things. Sally, your desk is your desk. It's maybe not managed in the same way as Heather's is, but you prefer to be
considered tidy, you know.
You prefer to be in charge of how it is yourself,
Yeah,
you know.
definitely.
Regards the job, you know, Heather, I think you're looking for some reassurances that Sally is contributing as much as you are, and you're coming from the place of having, you know, run the department yourself. So that's, you know, your perception is coloured by that. Sally, from your point of view, you want Heather to trust you, to know and to acknowledge that you can actually do the job.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'll just bring the flip chart in then. And start wherever you want to start, really. So one of the topics you've talked about is around sort of noise, disturbance, quiet, concentration in the office.
Talking too much and too loud on the phone.
So a need to get a better deal about when you talk, how much you talk. I don't know, it's up to you.
Just keeping the volume down a bit, you know.
Okay.
Well, I'd like some conversation from your
I'm not
side.
saying don't have no conversation. I'm saying keep it a bit quieter.
How about if I put conversation in the office, or just conversation?
Okay, yeah.
You know what it means.
Yeah.
Okay, that's fine. Okay, let's start with that. Well done. So that's the first one. So
He's going on about my eating.
talking about how much
Yeah, because
chat
it's
we
all
have
the
in the
time
office,
and
or
so
do or
loud.
don't have in the office. So for you, you know, it's important that you get to eat little but often, Sally.
Yeah.
Heather, for you, this is a disturbance. You've mentioned about, you know, a particular...
It's not just a disturbance. I can't deal with it.
Yeah.
You know, medically.
I've been
She kind of scoffs when I told her.
Eating.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's
Yep.
just the whole
This is
sound.
a big issue.
Let's get that down as well. You're doing well. You're doing fine. So we've got eating. Fantastic. What else?
You're going on about
Breaks, too many breaks.
too many breaks.
So the
Let's
thing
go get a cup
about
of tea.
the two of you being, you know, responsible for some similar tasks and jobs in the office is that you need to get hold of Sally.
Yeah.
Sally, you need to, you know, you've got a variety of things you do, including some things different from Heather. You like to sort of talk to clients. You like to build the relationships with clients. Presumably, if you're eating quite frequently, you must be in and out of the office as well. And
yeah, I need a break as well because there's nothing going on in the room. She's got the headphones
work.
on. I need.
If you weren't eating all the time at your desk, I wouldn't have them on.
Something about, you know, time spent at the desk. How much time you're actually at the
Being
desk.
available when I need to be able to get information would be a good start.
And what about that topic from your point of
Well,
view?
I thought I was available when she needed me.
So it's about how much time you're actually at your desk, isn't
She
it?
obviously doesn't think I'm there enough, does she?
Would that work if I put time at desk?
I suppose so.
Because you've got different ideas about
Yeah,
it. For you, it's you're not
that
going to
kind
sit
of
there
covers-
8 hours a day actually in front of the monitor. For you, you need to be able to get hold of Sally, but Sally, you might be elsewhere. You might be
I'm
wanting
allowed to move from my desk, and I'm
said that
allowed
you
to go and
weren't.
speak to other people.
I'm
Never
only
said
going
that
to
you
put things on
weren't.
here that you two are agreed about. So
Yeah,
shall
no,
I put-
I agree. I think that covers a whole
Shall I put time
multitude
at
of things.
desk?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. It's important that this is yours. You know, I'm not going to dictate to you what you have to talk about. Time at desk. Fantastic. So you've got 3 substantial things there to talk about. What else? So there's the part of the mediation really where we're getting the agenda agreed. And as you can see, there's quite a bit of negotiation already taking place. The mediator's job is just to soak up all of that resentment that you can clearly hear being expressed between the two parties, and to concentrate on needs. So the thing the mediator says again and again and again is, right, so you need this, and you need this, and you need this, and you need this. So we're very much looking at conflict as an incompatibility of needs. So what you might notice, depending on the sort of background where you've come from, or if you've trained in a more civil mediation model, it's not a litigious process, it's not an investigative model, it's not an HR process. We're not looking at determining rights and wrongs. It's not evidential. We're really just, although the mediator makes a visual reference there, which we find is quite helpful, just to have something for the parties to refer back to. There's no notes being written down, there's no recording. Everything from this session will be without prejudice, can't be used anywhere else. So they're very much encouraged to negotiate quite freely, and as you can see, they're taking advantage of that, the two parties. A lot of hostility being expressed between the two. Okay, for the next bit, for the stage 5, we would have that whole agenda would be addressed in the discussions. For the sake of today's webinar, we're just going to pick one topic. I've had a couple of comments in the chat box. I'll come back to those after we see the stage 5. So the stage 5, really, we're going to pick one of the topics. For these two guys, what they're going to do is pick that clearly quite thorny issue to do with eating at the desk. And we're going to explore that issue in particular. We would do them all, but we're just going to pick one for the purpose of the video. So reframing, this is about moving from the past to the future, away from people's positions and insistences into their interests or needs, and really looking at really trying to engender a shared responsibility to make this situation better, rather than attributing blame and fault. So these two guys, quite clearly, a lot of finger pointing going on. It's your fault. No, it's not. It's your fault. What we're doing as mediator is just trying to ease that gently around to the place where they feel they have a shared responsibility to make this better, and in terms of what they're going to do about it. So we're looking for consensus. We summarise any areas of consensus and try and move on from anything that's a real sticking point into a place where they can actually get a sufficient volume of resolution between them, that they can get on and not need to be in conflict anymore. So we'll look at that after we've seen this video. I'll come back on the comments and questions we've had. So let's see what happens as these guys pick the first topic from their agenda and start to negotiate. Where should we start here? What do you want to pick?
With eating.
Yeah, because I think that's a big one. Well, look, they're all big issues, but it's as good a place as any. So. Okay.
Well, I mean, you know, well, you've probably known I've had a few appointments at the doctors and with the consultant, and they've recommended that I have small meals.
But you've never said that.
I know, but that's because we've had no relationship.
Yeah, but at the beginning, when you first moved in and you was eating, I asked, could you go to a different area? Because I don't like the sound of people eating. Yeah. You know, you kind of scoffed as though it's something I'm making up and it doesn't mean anything. But
I thought you would...
It really, I just can't concentrate. All I can hear is that sound of you eating.
See, I thought you were just being passive-aggressive because, you know, that whole thing about you not wanting me in the office. So it was an opportunity for you to say anything about anything I was doing.
No, nothing whatsoever. You just totally brushed it aside,
that's
carried on. And even to the point that it feels that you're doing it even more on purpose.
But I'm not. I actually feel uncomfortable eating in front of you, so I might have a grin on my face because I do that when I'm feeling uncomfortable. That's...
You might do, but if you'd actually listened and took account of what I said in the first place...
I misunderstood why you were saying it.
So I think Sally's saying that she's getting a better understanding of why you said that, and I wonder if, you know, are you...
No, I mean, if she'd have said to me she's got to eat regular, you know, small meals and things, that's fine, I appreciate that. But if it's going to be a certain time, why doesn't she have it when she goes on her breaks or her walks around, take the food with her then?
So away from
so that I'm not having
away from
this,
the desk. Okay. So you're really saying, Heather, you know, as the invitation is to sort of try and do your eating away from the desk.
Yeah. But then you have to accept that I am going to be away from the desk. And
but I mean that's fine if you're going off and you're having or you're having your breaks and you're eating on your breaks. But it seems that you go off, you have your breaks, you're talking to everyone, you're coming back and eating and still not doing work.
Yeah. I take my food with me. I could do that. That's not a problem.
The suggestion is that Sally might, when she's away from the desk, do her eating then, so that you don't have to do your eating when you're back at the desk.
Do that.
Yeah, and then it's not distracting me.
Is that something that you're agreeing on?
Yeah, that's no problem at all. It's easy to do.
Okay, fine. So eating away from the desk?
Yeah.
I mean, things that don't make a noise isn't a problem.
Yeah.
You know, if you eat an orange or some soft fruit, I'm not going to hear that, but it always seems like apples and crisps and anything, you know, crunchy
like
biscuits.
Those. Yeah, well, I like those. That's the
well,
problem.
don't we all? But
yeah.
Okay, that was fairly painless agreement. Fantastic. There we go. So they're getting an agreement on that first of those topics that Sally will eat away from the desk. Now, as a removed third-party observer for these mediations, sometimes I do get the comment. People say, "Well, they're only trivial things. They're only little things." Yeah, I suppose to somebody who's detached from the situation, it feels that way. But these things can become a really big deal for people when they're coming into work for 8 hours a day. Their colleagues eating, and every time they do it, actually drives them up the wall. Or the way that they do their emails, or the fact they copy the manager into emails, or the fact that they seem to be in factions or groups and somebody feels left out, or all these little things would add up to very, very poor relationships, which, fueled by people's own in-groups and out-groups and fueled by social media these days, they can grow into something really big. So the purpose of us getting the mediation at this point is to nip all of these things in the bud so it doesn't have to become a formal process. Just wanted to get that in because when people hear about, oh, she's only eating at the desk, what's the big deal? It's a big deal if you're involved in it, even though it may not look that way to somebody who's removed from the situation. So that was our sort of stage 5. We moved on from any thorny disagreements. We've got an agreement, some consensus around the eating thing, and then we're ready really to write this up into some form of an agreement. But I just want to pause at that point because we're getting quite a few questions and comments. One from Alicia who says, can this same model for mediation be used online? Yeah, no problem in just translating directly from this to the online setting. Pros and cons of doing mediation online. Ultimately, we would prefer to do it face-to-face. But sometimes because of logistics and geography and time differences, actually, it's very difficult to get people in the same room together. So we've been, of course, in the last 3 years or so, since you know what, been doing a lot more online mediation. It works. The only place we would absolutely draw the line with online mediation is where we're doing team mediations and you get to more than about 4 or 5 people, even 3 or 4 people. It gets very, very difficult. Trying to do that on Teams or on Zoom, it's hard. The same model applies, but in practical terms, trying to do team mediation with any more than 3 or 4 people is just doesn't work, quite frankly. So yes, the model can be applied online, you bet. Thank you, Alicia, for your question. Anastasia, you've got a question here about the way you work is your parties prepare a statement that they read out to each other in uninterrupted time, which we discuss in a second meeting without each party before the joint meeting. What do you think of this approach? Well, we don't do it. I don't favour it, but I don't think anybody's going to suffer serious injury if you do that. I would rather people turn up and say what's on their minds. Things change quite quickly, and I think if you were writing a statement, even if you did it the day before and then discussed it with the mediator in a second meeting before the joint session and refine it and turn it into something more future focused, not for me really. I think I wouldn't say you're doing it wrong or anything like that. Like I say, I don't think anybody would suffer greatly by using that approach. And it's fair to say that there are many different approaches to workplace mediation. What we prefer is to have that offloading and catharsis, so people really get things off their chests, and in order that they can actually get the psychological contact. So a lot more I could say about that. Psychological contact is being fully present with the other party, warts and all, telling them what's really on your mind and what you need from them and hearing what they need from you. For me, it would feel that a written statement that you read out could get in the way of having such a frank and contactful exchange with the other party. But good luck, Anastasia. I hope it works for you. And like I say, there's lots of different ways that people do mediation. Derek has a question. Derek's got 2 now. Is it normal to mediate alone or with a co-mediator? You could do either. Experienced mediators tend to work alone. In practical terms, if you're an external freelancer selling your services into an organisation, you're probably going to have to charge more if there's 2 mediators than if there's 1. For a lot of the in-house services that we've helped to set up over the last 24 years. Some places they work all the time with co-mediators. They'll work in twos, and it's fine. It's really good if you're just doing occasional cases. So I'm thinking about some of the universities where we've helped set up in-house mediation services, and they always work in twos, and they really value the ongoing learning that you can get from debriefing with your co-mediator, giving and receiving feedback with your co-mediator. 4 years are better than 2 sometimes when you get into sticky situations in mediations. It's helpful to have a partner who has maybe got an idea that you've not had, or can think of something that you've not thought of. There is real benefit to using co-mediation. The main downside, I would say, Derek, is that sometimes, particularly in the individual meetings, parties can feel it's a bit overwhelming. So they come in, they're already scared and a bit reticent. They come into their individual meeting and there's 2 mediators sitting in the other side of the room. It can feel a little bit too much. So either way works, whatever's best for you. We tend to use single mediators, mostly because our panel are professional mediators. It's what they do all the time. So they're very, very competent at working alone. I mentioned team mediation earlier. So I would say if you've got any more than about 4 or 5 parties, it's good to have a second mediator. Just easier to manage the exchange, and particularly any hostile exchange in the joint meeting when there's 2 of you. But great question, Derek. And you've got another one as well, Derek. In the initial solo meeting, the mediators said that whatever's said won't be shared with the other party. Yeah. When summarising party 1 situation, the mediator shares info with it's nothing, not disclosing anything. Now, we've been careful about that one, Derek. So there's nothing disclosed from the individual meeting. It's only what she said in the joint session that the mediator summarises. Okay, so that's fine, because they're saying it to each other or in front of each other. So had the party said something privately in the party 1 meeting, that wouldn't be mentioned in the joint session, no way. So we're only summarising what they've already said in front of the other one in the joint meeting. Thanks very much for your questions and comments. We love it. Really helps. So we're moving on with Sally and Heather into building an agreement. So we've very much abbreviated the stage 5. We've sort of dealt with that one issue about eating. And then, of course, they've gone through all of the others. The mediator in this case is scribbling up on the flip chart. It's quite helpful to have that visual referent. So the 2 parties and the mediator are all looking at the flip chart and thinking of this as a problem to be solved. So this is partly what we do. It's called in the literature separating the issues from the people. So it starts to feel like instead of the 2 parties banging their heads together, they're putting their heads together to solve that problem over there on the flip chart. So it's all about, these are the things that need to be resolved. How are you jointly going to do it? So it's engendering this sense of a shared responsibility. You don't have to have it, and I'm not wedded to it. Quite often we don't do it. You could use post-its on the wall. You could use nothing at all. It depends how many things they've got to discuss. Sometimes there's one issue that needs to be negotiated. Sometimes there might be a dozen. But again, back to Anastasia's point, there's lots of different ways of doing this. The point is sticking to the basics. So the mediator giving people, having an understanding of where this conflict has come from as an incompatibility of needs, giving people equal treatment, reframing, trying to move away from the hostile, evidential, blame-focused place into more of a solution-focused place where they both get a good chance to offload, a good chance to have that catharsis. They feel as if they've been treated equally, that the mediator is invested equally in their interests and has facilitated their conversation towards the point of building an agreement, which is where we are now. So as we get to the place of building an agreement, we're gathering up their offers, what they are prepared to give to the other party, any concessions, where they're prepared to give ground, and any ideas they may have jointly or separately about what could happen differently so that their conflict goes away. The mediator will help to write that up for them, so it's very much their agreement, not the mediator's. And again, it's one of the myths and legends about mediation is that the mediator makes the agreement for you. That's not the way it goes. It's simply the mediator is there as the servant of the parties, not as their master, to get down their points of agreement into some form, which will be a non-binding agreement. It's made in good faith. It's up to them to keep to it. There's no consequence if they don't do so. But what we do need to have in there is a fallback arrangement as well. What are you going to do in case the agreement fails? That can feel a bit weird at this point in the mediation session. It's a bit like a prenup about what's going to happen if the relationship falls apart again. But it's important to have at least a sentence in there. Otherwise, they'll go back into free fall, go back to where they started. So very brief bit about building agreements. And then the closure and follow-up is our stage 7, which is where we just agree about who, if anybody, is going to see the parties' agreement. They may choose that nobody gets to see it, they'll just keep it to themselves, or they may choose to let the referrer see it. We like it if they can agree that the referrer sees it, but they have the last word on that. And then we close the session down and agree to follow up. So we would follow this situation up after about 6 weeks, basically to say how you're getting on. Is it working? Do you need any further support? And that will be done discreetly and separately to the two parties in an email, just to ask them individually if it's working and whether the agreement either needs revisions or if they need any further help from us. And if they consent, then that would be fed back to the referrer, and that brings the whole process to a complete end. So let's have a look at that very last bit, where we do the building and the agreement, the closure and follow-up with closing the session down and agreeing about the follow-up period as we conclude with Sally and Heather. That's it. So with that agreement and the way you've worded it, are you happy for that to be seen by the manager so that he knows?
I am. I think it shows that then we're trying.
I mean, if you're happy for him to see that, then that's great. What we can do is send that back to him as the referrer, so that he knows what you're doing. I think the value in that is that he can support you to make sure that happens. If he knows what you're trying to do.
I think that would work.
Yeah, I think that would be.
And if you don't mind, if I follow up with you in about 6 weeks' time, all I'll do is a short email and say, how are things going? Is it all working out? Just make sure your agreement's actually happening. That'll be all right with you as well.
That's fine.
Okay,
and hopefully it'll all be.
In that case, we're done. You've got your agreements. Mediation's finished there. So this will send you a copy of this, and James will get a copy, so you can have that sort of by your side, so you know what it is you've got to be doing, and James can hopefully support you to do it. Be in touch in 6 weeks just to check how things are going.
Okay.
And we're finished.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
So there we have the agreement phase and discussing the follow-up with Sally and Heather. Pretty much what I said at the top of that clip as well. So hopefully they get to this point of agreement. It's round about 4 out of 5. Don't believe anyone who says they get 100% agreements in mediation. It doesn't work that way, and it depends what you get referred and how the quality of referrals that you get as well. But 4 out of 5-ish. Plus or minus, will reach an agreement like that. Mostly agreements hold up, we find. The mediation agreements might be only small agreements. I would rather have a small, robust agreement than a highfalutin agreement that's going to fall apart as soon as they have their first problem back in the workplace. And I think we really need to get to that intense exchange that we saw exemplified there between Sally and Heather, where they're really expressing their resentments, getting to the heart of it, and then realising actually if we're going to get on and come into work without having World War III every day, we do need to come up with some solutions. And that's where they get to, with the help of the mediator, acting as this impartial third party. One more question's come in from Tracy. Tracy, thanks very much. I was trained to have them facing each other and to speak to each other. Would it be usual for you to have them positioned like this? Now, I'll tell you what I'm enjoying today is hearing that there are several ways to do this. And that's great because you're making that point for me. I'm not saying this is absolutely how you have to do workplace mediation every time. You could have two mediators. You could do your prepared statement. You could have parties sitting facing each other. Great. It's not how we do it. And we've evolved our method, I think, over the last 23, 24 years. This is where we've got to. If you do it differently, good luck to you. Tracy, as regards that, when we start off in the joint session, I think it's a bit too much. If they're looking straight at each other and talking at each other for the uninterrupted time, I'd be a bit nervous. That's a bit too intense. And we need to moderate the intensity, I think. So it can be very, very challenging for people. I think where we would start is having them doing their uninterrupted time to the mediator. Thereafter, they would be invited to talk to each other. So just for that short bit when they're doing the uninterrupted time, but when we get into the agenda making, then we would invite parties actually to speak to each other directly. The chairs, sometimes people move the chairs around. We would position them in the room when we set it up so that they're not, again, pointing straight eye to eye. They're just offset slightly. So if the parties want to, they can turn and look at each other. But if they don't want to, then their gaze is directed towards the mediator. But like I say, people often move the furniture around as the session progresses and as they get to a better place with each other. But we wouldn't initially have them speaking eye to eye. It would be a bit much. So there we have it. There's our workplace mediation exemplar, and the sort of 7 stages, some of the skills along the way, very brief clips for each of the stages there. You can find this webinar on the archive of the webinars if you want to pick it up later. And if there are any further questions, if you think of anything afterwards, then we'd be very pleased to hear from you. So there we have that. Oh, hang on, a quick one coming at the end there from Lisa. I'll deal with it, Lisa. What happens if one of the parties attends their first meeting but doesn't want to go ahead after that? What obligations does the mediator have on feeding this back? Okay, fair enough. We would feedback that they attended the initial session and then chose not to participate any further. We wouldn't give any reasons. So we don't breach confidentiality there. If somebody comes along to the individual meeting, decides not to do the joint session, fine. We just feed that back to the referrer and let them pick it up from there. Quite often referrers are pleased to have given mediation a go. So even though they might have known that was going to happen or guessed, they get it sort of from the horse's mouth that mediation's been attempted and the parties chose not to participate beyond the individual meeting. Okay. So there we are. I don't want to bite into your lunch break. We do these webinars about once a month, usually on a Friday, for about 45-50 minutes, something like that. We're coming into our summer break, so we will be announcing the new programme for next year's webinars as well, and you'll be very, very welcome to join us. Come do have a look at this link here. The link's going to appear in the chat box in a second. ukmediation.net/webinars. You can keep up to date with all of those, and on the website you can visit the archive and see some of the webinars that we've done in the past. Do keep in touch with us. All the usual channels there are up on your screen. Like and subscribe, check out our LinkedIn, check out our Twitter and Facebook. Be very pleased to keep in touch with you. Be great to have you join us again on a future webinar as well. Thanks for watching the anatomy of a workplace mediation. Have a good weekend and a good summer, and see you soon.